Hey guys, tonight we're easing into something slow, dimly lit, and historically uncomfortable in the calmest possible way. So go ahead and lower the lights, adjust your pillow, maybe let your phone rest somewhere nearby but not too nearby, and just let the next stretch of quiet history drift along. If you enjoy these long, low-energy wanderings through the past, you're always welcome to subscribe. It helps keep these quiet histories alive, and it asks absolutely nothing of you right now. Tonight, we're settling into the daily life of a medieval woman accused of witchcraft, not at the dramatic end that movies love, but in the long, dull, exhausting stretch beforehand. The waiting, the uncertainty, the paperwork, the boredom, the fear that becomes routine, the kind of life where nothing happens quickly and everything feels permanent. In the medieval world, being accused of witchcraft was rarely about spells or broomsticks. It was about being noticeable in the wrong way. Too poor, too old, too sharp-tongued, too quiet, too knowledgeable, or sometimes just inconvenient. Once the accusation was spoken aloud, life did not explode into chaos. It slowed down instead. It became smaller. Our woman, whose name rarely survives the records, wakes up early, because medieval mornings are early whether you want them to be or not. She may still be in her home if the accusation is recent, or she may already be confined to a holding cell, a local jail, or a church building repurposed for custody. None of these places are designed for comfort. They are designed for waiting. If she is still at home, her neighbors no longer greet her the same way. People glance, people whisper, children are pulled closer. Milk goes sour a little faster, or at least that is what people say. She is still expected to cook, to clean, to carry water, to tend animals if she has them. Daily labor does not pause for accusations of consorting with the devil. If anything, it becomes heavier, because help disappears quietly. Food becomes simpler. Bread, thin porridge, whatever can be made quickly and cheaply. People stop sharing. Charity dries up. If she begs, she is ignored more easily than before. Accusations turn a person into background noise. If she has already been detained, her days are quieter still. A small room, stone or wood, damp air, light coming through a narrow opening that never quite reaches the floor. She sits, she stands, she lies down. Time stretches. There is no clock. There is no schedule she can see. Meals arrive when they arrive. Usually bread, sometimes broth, often cold. Guards are not cruel every moment. That is something the records make clear. They are bored. They are tired. They have other prisoners. She becomes another task, another door to open, another bowl to slide across the floor. Cruelty, when it comes, is casual, routine, not theatrical. Her clothing is unchanged at first. A simple dress, worn shoes, a shawl, nothing dramatic. Later, items may be removed. Belts, pins, anything considered suspicious. Hair may be covered or uncovered depending on local custom. None of this is explained to her. Explanation is not considered necessary. The days before formal questioning are the strangest. Nothing happens, and yet everything feels like it already has. She replays conversations in her mind. The argument with the neighbor, the moment she spoke too sharply, the time she knew too much about herbs or childbirth or sickness. Knowledge is a dangerous thing when wrapped in fear. Sleep is light. Medieval nights are already dark and cold, but now they are crowded with thoughts. Stone floors do not forgive restless bodies. Straw mats itch. Rats move when everything else is still. She learns the sound of the building. Footsteps, keys, distant voices that never quite become words. When questioning begins, it does not feel like a trial. It feels like a conversation with rules she does not know. Men sit across from her. Clergy, magistrates, local officials. They ask about her life in pieces. who she knows, where she learned certain things, why she was seen in certain places, why she said certain words, why her neighbor's cow died, why a child fell ill, why the weather turned. Her answers are written down, summarized, rephrased. She is interrupted, she is corrected. She is reminded to tell the truth, which already assumes she is not. Each session ends quietly. No verdict, just more waiting. Back in her cell or her borrowed room, she returns to the small rituals of survival. Eating slowly, conserving strength, stretching stiff joints, whispering prayers that feel both urgent and strangely distant. Faith is complicated now. God feels close and far at the same time. Other women may be nearby, accused, witnesses, prisoners for unrelated reasons. Sometimes they speak, sometimes they don't. Conversations are careful. Everyone knows words travel. Silence becomes a skill. Outside, life continues. Markets open. Bells ring. Children grow. The world does not pause for accusations. That may be the hardest part. The realization that everything she was part of keeps moving without her. Her reputation unravels in absentia. People reinterpret her entire life. Kindness becomes manipulation. Skill becomes sorcery. Independence becomes defiance. Even her body is discussed. Moles, scars, birthmarks. Anything can be repurposed as evidence, because evidence is flexible when fear is involved. Days turn into weeks. Weeks blur. Time loses edges. She becomes very good at waiting, at sitting with uncertainty, at existing without resolution. She is not yet condemned. That matters technically. In practice, her life is already reduced, already smaller, already quieter. And so the daily life continues. Bread, stone, questions without answers, sleep that never quite settles, a future that has narrowed to the next meal, the next visit, the next sound of keys. This is not the dramatic moment history likes to remember. This is the slow middle, the long before, the part where nothing happens loudly and everything happens anyway. And as the nights stretch on, she waits, not for justice exactly, but for an ending of any kind, because even uncertainty after long enough begins to feel heavier than fear. And we'll stay right here for a while longer, drifting gently through these quiet days before anything final ever arrives. The next stretch of her life settles into something almost structured, though no one would ever call it kind. After the first rounds of questioning, the authorities tend to slow down. Medieval bureaucracy, much like modern bureaucracy, enjoys taking its time. Papers need copying, statements need comparing, clergy need consulting. Everyone involved wants to be very sure they are doing the correct thing, or at least something that looks correct enough to defend later. For her, this means longer gaps between interrogations, days where nothing happens at all, days where the silence presses harder than shouting ever could. She wakes with the light because there is no reason not to. Sleep ends early when the ground is cold and the air smells faintly of mildew and old wood. Her body adjusts whether she wants it to or not. She begins to notice details she never cared about before, the way moisture creeps along the stone, the specific rhythm of footsteps outside her door, which guard clears his throat before speaking, which one avoids eye contact entirely, as if she might infect him with something invisible and inconvenient. Meals remain predictable, bread often stale, occasionally a thin soup, usually lukewarm by the time it reaches her, water that tastes faintly metallic or earthy. She eats slowly, not out of enjoyment, but because there is nothing else to do. Hunger becomes background noise, manageable, dull, persistent. If she is allowed visitors, they are few. Family members may come, stiff and unsure of where to look. Conversations stay shallow. News from the outside world feels unreal, like a story she once heard but no longer participates in. If she has children, This is often the most painful part. They are brought reluctantly, warned to behave, warned to say nothing strange. They stare at her as if she is already changed. Religious instruction increases. A priest may visit, not aggressively, just persistently. He encourages confession, reflection, prayer. The assumption is always there, humming beneath the words, that guilt exists and simply needs help surfacing. Repentance is framed as kindness, cooperation as mercy. She prays because that is what one does. She prays because not praying would look suspicious. The words come automatically at first, then more slowly. Faith, once routine, becomes something she negotiates with. She wonders whether silence is also a kind of prayer. Her body begins to ache in new ways. Sitting too long, standing too long, lying down without real rest. Medieval life was already hard on the body. Detention strips away the small movements that kept joints flexible and muscles useful. She stretches when she can, rolls her shoulders, rubs her hands together for warmth. Clothing wears down, fabric thins, shoes soften and warp. Replacement is unlikely. Cleanliness becomes theoretical. Water is limited. Washing happens rarely and without privacy. Shame becomes another quiet companion. Though she tries to ignore it, there are larger problems. At some point, she is examined. Not violently, not dramatically, just thoroughly. Women from the community may be called in. Midwives, matrons. They look for marks, anything unusual. The irony is thick. Women policing women, bound by fear and expectation, doing what they must to protect themselves. Every freckle becomes noteworthy. Every scar gains significance. Her body, once simply hers, is now evidence. She learns to detach, to think of herself in pieces rather than a whole person. It makes things easier. Rumors reach her indirectly. A guard mentions something in passing. A priest lets slip a phrase. Someone testified. Someone remembered something differently. Someone always disliked her anyway. These fragments float around her, never forming a complete picture. Outside, the seasons may change. Cold deepens, or warmth returns. She feels it through stone and air rather than sunlight. Time moves in ways she cannot measure, but her body knows. Hands crack in winter. Sweat gathers in summer. Fleas appear and disappear. Life continues at a reduced scale. She learns the rules without being taught them. Speak calmly. Do not argue. Do not cry too much. Do not laugh at all. Answer what is asked, not what you think they mean. Meaning is dangerous. At night, she listens. Someone nearby sobs softly. Someone prays aloud until told to stop. Someone is taken away and does not return. That knowledge settles into her bones. Absence becomes louder than presence. Her name is written down more often now. Lists, notes, margins. She exists increasingly on paper, less in the world. The version of her that circulates among officials is flatter, simpler, easier to condemn or absolve depending on convenience. She thinks about ordinary things. The weight of a bucket, the smell of bread baking, the sound of animals settling for the night. Memory becomes a place she visits carefully because staying too long hurts. This is the strange truth of the waiting period. It is not constant terror, it is adaptation. Humans are good at adapting to almost anything given time. She adapts to confinement, to suspicion, to being talked about rather than talked to. And as days continue to fold into one another, she understands something quietly important. Whatever happens next, this version of her life is already over. Even if she walks free, she will never quite return to the person who did not know how easily everything could be taken away. So she waits, calm on the surface, tired underneath, practiced in stillness. A woman suspended in time, living a life that history rarely bothers to describe, which lasts far longer than the ending everyone remembers. And will stay here a little longer, drifting through these narrowed days, before the process moves again. Because medieval justice, like medieval life, never rushes unless it absolutely has to. Eventually, and it is always eventually rather than suddenly, the tone shifts, not dramatically, not with announcements, just a slight change in posture, in pacing, in the way people speak to her. The waiting phase thins out, and something more deliberate takes its place. Interrogations become more regular now, still spaced out, still calm on the surface, but no longer casual. The questions repeat, the same ones, phrased slightly differently each time. Officials are listening for inconsistencies, though they would never use that word out loud. They are listening for fatigue, for confusion, for cooperation. She notices that the room feels smaller during these sessions, or maybe she is just more aware of the walls, the table, the chair that never quite fits comfortably. She is placed where they want her, angled slightly, as if position itself might encourage honesty. The men questioning her speak softly. This is important. Raised voices are unnecessary. They are not trying to scare her yet. They're trying to tire her, to convince her that resistance is impractical, that agreement would make everything easier for everyone involved. They talk about mercy, about salvation, about how confession is not the same as guilt. Words are doing a lot of work here, bending carefully around one another. They suggest admitting to smaller things can prevent larger consequences, that clarity is a gift, that God already knows the truth anyway. She is asked to explain herself again, her life, her habits, her knowledge, why she knows certain plants, why people come to her for help, why she speaks the way she does. The answers she gave before are not wrong exactly, they are just no longer sufficient. When she insists on her innocence, it is noted. When she hesitates, it is noted more carefully. Silence becomes suspicious. Speech becomes risky. There's no correct rhythm, no safe pace. She learns that answering quickly looks rehearsed, while answering slowly looks deceptive. She cannot win, but she does not know that yet. Back in her cell, the air feels heavier, not because anything physical is changed, but because the future has begun to lean in her direction. She senses it the way one senses weather before it arrives. Something is coming. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon enough to matter. Sleep becomes patchy. She drifts rather than rests. Dreams blur into waking thoughts. Faces from her past appear uninvited. Conversations replay themselves. She edits them in her mind, saying the things she should have said, the things that might have helped if time were something that could be folded backward. The priest visits more often now. He speaks gently, with practiced concern. He frames confession as relief, as rest, as a way to stop fighting. He does not accuse her directly. He simply asks her to consider the state of her soul. He reminds her that even innocent people can be misled, that the devil is subtle, that unknowing participation is still participation. This is a clever argument, and it works on more people than one might expect. It allows her to be wrong without being malicious, weak without being evil. She considers this carefully. Words have consequences now. She weighs each one as if it might be her last useful possession. Outside, testimony accumulates. Neighbors speak, some reluctantly, some eagerly. Old grievances resurface, freshly pre-purposed. A disagreement over land becomes evidence of malice. A sharp comment becomes a curse. A refusal becomes hostility toward the community itself. She is rarely told exactly what has been said, only that people have spoken, that concerns have been raised, that patterns are emerging. Patterns are particularly dangerous because they sound reasonable even when they are imagined. At some point, the idea of confession becomes a constant presence, not as a desire, but as a concept, a door that is always there. Officials speak of it as if it were inevitable, as if everyone arrives there eventually, one way or another.
She notices changes in how she is treated, small ones, less patience, less reassurance, more reminders of authority. The shift is subtle, but unmistakable. She is no longer being evaluated, she is being processed. Food arrives less regularly, or perhaps it is simply less satisfying. Hunger sharpens the edges of thought. Weakness makes agreement feel tempting. She catches herself wondering what would happen if she just said what they wanted to hear. This is not cowardice, it is exhaustion. She is shown examples, not directly, never directly, but stories are told. Others who confessed and were treated gently, others who resisted and suffered needlessly. These stories are vague enough to avoid responsibility, but clear enough to shape behavior. Her body responds before her mind does. Shoulders tighten, hands tremble slightly. She grows quieter, not because she has less to say, but because saying it no longer feels useful. When she is questioned again, the tone is patient but firm. They ask her to walk through her life slowly, to notice moments where things might have gone wrong, where influence may have crept in. They suggest answers, lightly, almost helpfully. She is free to agree or disagree. Of course. The room smells faintly of ink and wax. The sounds of writing become louder than voices. Each scratch of the quill feels permanent. She wonders how much of her life can fit on a page, and whether that version will resemble her at all. Afterward, she returns to herself feeling hollow rather than frightened. Fear has peaks and valleys. This feels flatter, heavier. She sits and stares at the wall, not thinking much of anything, just breathing, just existing. At night, she hears less noise, or perhaps she has learned to filter it out. Silence is no longer unsettling. It is familiar, almost comforting in the way numbness can be. She prays again, not for rescue, but for clarity, for strength, for the ability to endure whatever comes next without losing herself completely. It is a modest request, and she knows that. The days continue. Interrogation, waiting, prayer, thin meals, thin hope. The path ahead is narrowing, though she can still not see where it ends. And somewhere between one question and the next, the idea settles quietly into her mind, unwelcome but persistent, that this process is not really about truth at all. It's about closure, about resolution, about making the fear stop moving and pinning it down in one place. She does not know yet what choice she will make when pressed harder, only that the pressure is increasing, slowly, steadily, the way medieval systems prefer. So we stay with her here, in this uneasy middle space, where confession hangs in the air like incense, sweet and suffocating, and the days continue to pass, unremarkable and irreversible, one after another.
After a while, the interrogations stop feeling like interruptions and start feeling like the structure of her days. Everything else becomes the space in between. She measures time now by when she is called forward, when she is sent back, when the door closes again with that familiar, dull sound that no longer startles her. Her body adjusts further. Hunger becomes a quiet companion rather than an alarm. Cold settles into her bones and stays there. She stops trying to be comfortable because comfort requires hope, and hope has begun to feel impractical. Instead, she focuses on endurance, on getting through the next hour without shaking, on sitting without drawing attention to herself. When she is brought in again, the questions feel closer somehow, less about her life in general and more about specific moments. They ask her to remember exact days, exact words, exact thoughts. This is, of course, impossible, but impossibility is part of the design. They read back parts of her earlier statements, slowly, neutrally, as if they are not hers at all. Sometimes the words sound unfamiliar, not wrong exactly, but distant, flattened. like a version of her that has been pressed between pages and left there too long. They ask her to explain discrepancies, small ones, natural ones. Anyone's memory would bend under this kind of repetition, but bending is interpreted as breaking. She explains calmly, carefully. She is very good at being calm now. There are pauses built into the process, long silences after questions, time to sit with the weight of what has been asked, time for doubt to seep in. She learns not to rush to fill the quiet. Silence, once terrifying, has become a tool. The priest returns, always gentle, always tired-looking, as if this process weighs on him too. He speaks of reconciliation, of peace, of how exhausting it must be to hold on to denial. He does not raise his voice, he does not threaten, he simply waits for her to agree with him. Sometimes she almost does, just to make the conversation end. Back in her cell, she notices she is forgetting things, small details, names, the exact sound of her own door at home, the rhythm of ordinary life. Memory fades when it is not exercised. The present is too demanding to leave room for the past. If there are other accused women nearby, she hears less from them now. One voice disappears entirely, another grows quieter. Someone coughs through the night, and then does not cough again. She does not ask questions. Questions invite answers she may not want. She is allowed outside occasionally, briefly, a courtyard, a strip of sky, fresh air that feels almost overwhelming. She closes her eyes and lets the light hit her face. It feels indecent, like a luxury she has not earned. People watch her from a distance. Guards, servants, clerks. No one speaks. She is an object of curiosity rather than interest, something already categorized. When she returns inside, the walls feel closer than before. Freedom, even in small doses, makes confinement sharper. The idea of confession continues to hover, not dramatically, just persistently. It appears in conversation, in sermons, in passing remarks. It is framed as cooperation, as maturity, as acceptance of reality. Resistance is described as childish, stubborn, unnecessary. She notices how often officials say the word truth without defining it. Truth becomes something external, something already known, something she is expected to align herself with. Her own understanding of events is treated as irrelevant. Her body betrays her in small ways, a tremor in her hands, a hesitation in her voice. These are noticed, written down, interpreted. Stress becomes evidence. She begins to rehearse answers in her mind, not because she plans to lie, but because she wants to survive the questioning without unraveling. Even so, the rehearsals blur. Everything feels slippery now. One afternoon, she is told, calmly, that things would go much easier if she were more forthcoming. The phrase is delivered gently, almost kindly. There is no immediate threat attached, just an implication hanging there, heavy and unspoken. That night, sleep refuses to come at all. She lies awake, staring into darkness that feels thicker than before. Her thoughts circle the same few ideas, what they want, what she can give without destroying herself, whether those things are the same. She thinks about the stories she has heard, about women who confessed and were spared further suffering, about women who resisted and endured longer. She has no way of knowing which stories are true, or whether truth even matters anymore. In the morning, she feels strangely calm, the kind of calm that comes from exhaustion rather than peace. Her emotions feel distant, as if they belong to someone else. This detachment worries her briefly, then stopped mattering. When she is brought in again, the atmosphere is different. Not harsher, just more focused. Fewer questions, more statements. They speak to her as if they are almost finished. She listens carefully. She nods at the appropriate moments. She says very little. Saying little feels safer than saying nothing. The walls seem closer now.
Or maybe she is simply more aware of the space she occupies within them. Her existence feels provisional, temporary, on loan. As she is led back to her cell, she realizes that the waiting is changing shape. It is no longer just waiting for something to happen. It is waiting to be asked the final version of the same question she has been answering all along. And she knows in a quiet, untheatrical way that when that moment comes, whatever she says will not really belong to her anymore. It will belong to the record, to the process, to the need for an ending. So she sits, she breathes, she conserves what little strength she has left. And the days continue, narrowing further, gently, relentlessly, towards a conclusion that still has not arrived, but is now close enough to feel like footsteps down a long stone corridor, unhurried, unavoidable, and already on their way.
By now, she understands the rhythm of this place better than she ever wanted to understand anything. The sounds, the pauses, the way people avoid certain words while circling them endlessly. Nothing feels new anymore, and that is perhaps the most unsettling part. Novelty would imply possibility. Routine implies direction. She is brought in again, and this time the questions are fewer. The men across from her speak as if they are clarifying details rather than investigating. They reference earlier statements with confidence, as if those words have already settled into something solid and unquestionable. She listens carefully, because listening has become safer than speaking. They explain procedures without quite calling them that, the steps that usually come next, the ways cases like hers tend to resolve. The tone is informative, almost instructional, the way one might explain a process to someone who will soon be part of it. She notices that they no longer ask whether she is guilty. That question has quietly exited the conversation. Now they ask how she understands her involvement, how she interprets her experiences, how she might explain her actions in light of what is now known. This is the moment when many people begin to understand what is being asked of them. Not truth exactly, alignment, agreement, participation in a story that has already been drafted. She responds carefully. She acknowledges confusion. She admits uncertainty. These are safe admissions. They sound humble. They sound cooperative. The men nod. This is progress, they say. This is honesty beginning to surface. Back in her cell, she feels oddly lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because the tension of resistance has eased. Heavier because she knows what easing it means. The path forward is becoming clearer, and clarity is not always comforting. Her treatment improves slightly, not dramatically, just enough to be noticeable. Meals arrive more reliably. A guard speaks to her as if she is still a person. These small mercies feel transactional, though no one says so aloud. The priest visits again, and this time his manner is different, less coaxing, more reassurance. He speaks as if confession is no longer a question of if, but when. He frames it as an opportunity rather than a demand, a chance to tell her story properly. She wonders quietly when her story stopped being hers. At night, she practices speaking aloud, softly, carefully. She tests phrases, listens to how they sound in the air. Some words feel heavier than others. Some feel almost unreal. She adjusts, refines. This rehearsal is not deceit, it is preparation. She tells herself she is doing what she must to survive, that survival is not the same as surrender. These distinctions matter to her even if no one else will recognize them. Outside, the community has largely moved on. Fear needs resolution, and the process provides it. People feel safer knowing something is being done, that someone is being handled. Her fate becomes a reassurance rather than a concern. She is brought before officials again, and this time a document is present. Not finalized, not complete, just a draft. They explain that this is a record of her understanding of events. She is invited to review it, to correct it, to help shape it. The words are careful, vague. They do not accuse her outright, but they imply influence, suggest vulnerability, leave room for interpretation. She recognizes the craftsmanship immediately. This is a confession designed to satisfy without alarming. She hesitates. Hesitation is noted, but not punished. They wait. Patience has become their sharpest tool. Eventually, she nods, slowly. She suggests minor changes, clarifications. The men seem pleased. Collaboration is encouraged. The process feels almost respectful now, which is perhaps its most dangerous quality. When she returns to her cell, she sits quietly for a long time. She does not cry. Tears feel like an indulgence she can no longer afford. Instead, she breathes and lets the moment pass. She thinks about the version of herself that existed before all this, the woman who went about her days without imagining that ordinary actions could be reinterpreted so thoroughly. That version feels distant now, like someone she once knew rather than someone she was. The days that follow are calm, almost gentle. She is no longer questioned aggressively. She is asked to confirm rather than explain. Each confirmation tightens the shape of what is coming. She understands now that this is the stage where resistance would look irrational, where refusal would seem unreasonable. She has been guided too carefully for that. The path behind her has been smoothed away. At night, she sleeps a little more deeply, not because she feels safe, but because her body has given up on constant vigilance. Exhaustion claims its due. She dreams less of escape and more of completion, of things being finished, of silence without anticipation. And as the process continues, unhurried and methodical, she becomes acutely aware of something that history rarely mentions, that long before any sentence is pronounced, before any ending is formalized, the accused often learns exactly what is expected of them, not through threats, not through force, but through repetition, through patience, through the quiet relief of compliance. So she waits again, but this waiting is different. It is no longer suspended between possibilities. It is shaped, directed, calmly ushered toward a conclusion that feels less like a surprise and more like the final step in a process she has already been living through for too long. And we stay with her here, in this subdued, narrowing calm, as the machinery of judgment continues to turn, softly, steadily, without urgency, because urgency is unnecessary now. By the time this phase arrives, she has learned something essential about survival in this place. Resistance is loud. Agreement is quiet. Quiet things last longer. She is called in again, and this time the atmosphere is almost relaxed. Someone offers her a seat without prompting. Someone else adjusts papers neatly, as if presentation matters now. The men speak to her like a participant rather than a problem. This is meant to feel reassuring, and in a way, it works. They review what has already been written, slowly, carefully. The words no longer feel shocking. They feel familiar, which is more unsettling. She recognizes phrases she practiced in the dark, whispered to stone walls and stale air. Seeing them on paper feels like watching her thoughts leave her body and become something else. She is asked if this reflects her understanding, not her guilt, her understanding. The distinction is subtle and very deliberate. She nods, a small nod, controlled. It is enough. Back in her cell, she notices that the tension she once carried in her chest has dulled. It has not disappeared exactly. It has settled lower, heavier, more permanent. Fear has burned through itself and left behind something quieter. Acceptance, perhaps. or maybe just resignation with better posture. Her treatment continues to improve in small, calculated ways. A blanket that is slightly thicker, a meal that is almost warm, a guard who makes brief conversation about nothing in particular. These gestures feel earned, though she knows that is an illusion. Still, she accepts them. Refusing kindness would look strange now. She becomes very good at reading tone, a raised eyebrow, a pause before a word. She adjusts accordingly. She mirrors calm. She mirrors humility. She learns to say just enough and then stop. The priest's visits are shorter now. Less persuasion is needed. He speaks of peace, of the relief that comes with honesty, of how heavy secrets can be. She listens, nods, and keeps her thoughts carefully arranged behind her face. At night, she no longer replays arguments in her mind. There is no point. Instead, she focuses on breathing, on counting heartbeats, on the sensation of existing without anticipation. The future feels less like a threat and more like a certainty waiting to be scheduled. She begins to understand that this is how people disappear without anyone noticing, not suddenly, gradually, through cooperation, through reasonableness, through being very easy to manage. Other women pass through nearby cells, new voices, new sobs. She recognizes the early stages in them, the confusion, the indignation, the hope. She feels no envy and no superiority, just distance. She is already further along a path they have only stepped onto. When she is questioned again, it feels almost ceremonial. The questions are confirmations now, names, dates, general statements of belief. She answers smoothly. The officials seem satisfied. They thank her for her honesty. Gratitude feels surreal, but she accepts it without comment. She is allowed to wash more often, to adjust her clothing, to appear presentable. Appearance matters again, which tells her something important. The process is nearing a public-facing stage. She is being prepared. In the quiet moments, she reflects on how little of this feels like punishment and how much of it feels like administration. This is not rage, it is organization, fear turned into paperwork. She thinks about how her compliance will be interpreted later, as remorse, as truth, as validation of everything that happened. She does not dwell on it for long. Dwelling leads nowhere. Her body feels tired in a deep, settled way. Muscles ache constantly. Bones feel heavier. She moves slowly, deliberately, conserving energy without realizing she is doing so. When she lies down at night, she no longer imagines escape. Instead, she imagines stillness, quiet, an end to being observed so closely. This thought does not frighten her as much as it might have. She understands that she is being shaped into something specific, not a villain, not a hero, something manageable, something that fits neatly into the story the community needs. The days move gently forward. No urgency, no drama. Everything feels inevitable. And inevitability has its own kind of calm. She is told that arrangements are being made. The phrase is vague and unthreatening. Arrangements sound practical, necessary, ordinary. She does not ask for clarification. She already knows what kind of clarification would be offered. Back in her cell, she sits quietly and rests her hands in her lap. She notices how still they are now, how little they tremble. This seems important, though she cannot quite explain why. The waiting continues, but it has changed texture. It is no longer sharp or uncertain. It is smooth, processed, nearly complete. And so she becomes agreeable. Not because she believes the story being written around her, but because agreement is what remains when all other options have been gently, methodically removed.
We stay with her here, in this muted calm, where resistance has softened into cooperation, and cooperation has become a kind of shelter, thin but serviceable, as the final arrangements continue quietly in the background, already assumed, already underway.
By now, the days have lost their edges entirely. Morning and evening exist, technically, but they feel interchangeable. Light changes, sounds shift, but inside her, everything has settled into the same low, steady state. She is no longer bracing herself. She is maintaining. She is brought out again, and this time the room feels different in a way she cannot immediately place. Then she realizes what it is. There are more people. Not many, just enough to change the balance. Observers rather than participants. Clerks, assistants, people who are here to watch the process rather than shape it. This is not an interrogation, it is a rehearsal. They ask her to speak, slowly, clearly, to recount what has already been agreed upon. She does. Her voice surprises her. It is steadier than she expects. Not confident, just practiced, like someone reading familiar lines. No one interrupts. That feels important. When she finishes, there is a pause. Someone nods. Someone makes a small note. The priest murmurs approval. The moment passes without comment, which is how she knows she did well. She is thanked again. The word feels hollow now, but she accepts it as part of the exchange. Gratitude is currency in this place. When she returns to her cell, she sits down and exhales more deeply than she has in days. Not in relief, exactly, in completion. Something has been finalized, even if nothing has been formally announced. Her belongings are gathered, not taken away, just organized, folded, counted. This is done carefully, respectfully. She notices that no one rushes. There is no need. She is allowed more light now. A window is unshuttered longer than before. The sky looks unreal, like a painting left out too long. She studies clouds the way one studies something that will be soon unavailable. Food arrives at regular times, always the same. Predictability has become a kindness. She eats without thinking much about it. There is less conversation around her. Guards speak in low tones. Doors open and close smoothly. Everything feels settled, as if the building itself knows what is coming and sees no reason to make noise about it. At night, she sleeps more fully. Dreams are shallow and brief, mostly images without narrative. Stone, light, hands resting in her lap. She wakes without panic, which feels like an accomplishment. She is visited once more by the priest. This time, he does not ask questions, he offers reassurance. He tells her she has done the right thing, that cooperation is a form of courage, that peace is near. She listens politely. She has learned that politeness costs very little and buys time even now. She wonders briefly what people will say about her afterward, how they will describe her demeanor, calm, accepting, repentant. These words are already waiting. She knows this because she has heard them applied to others. Her body feels heavy, but not weak. There is a strange solidity to her now, as if all the shaking has been pressed out of her. She moves slowly, deliberately, conserving nothing because there is nothing left to conserve. She is brought before officials again, briefly. No questions, just confirmation that everything is in order, that she understands what will happen next. She nods. Understanding has become another word that does a lot of work. They tell her when, not precisely, just soon. Soon enough to prepare, soon enough to rest. Back in her cell, she sits and waits without counting time. She watches light shift across the wall. She listens to distant sounds that no longer invite interpretation. Everything feels neutral now, neither threatening nor comforting, just present. This is the part that never makes it into stories.
the stretch where nothing dramatic happens, where the accused does not scream or beg or resist, where she simply exists, fully aware, fully processed, fully accounted for. She has become, in every way that matters to the system around her, complete. And so we remain with her here in this soft, deliberate stillness, where the future has been decided but not yet announced, where the world has already adjusted to her absence, and where the final moments before public judgment pass quietly, almost kindly, like the last rehearsal before a performance no one expects her to improvise.
At this stage, nothing is explained unless it needs to be, and almost nothing needs to be anymore. She notices that people speak to her as if she already knows what is happening, which, in a way, she does. There are no surprises left to prepare for, only logistics. She is woken earlier than usual one morning, though the concept of early has become vague. The light feels thinner, the air colder. Someone opens her door with care, not urgency. She is told to stand, to come with them, to bring what little she has. The words are gentle, they always are now. She is taken to a different room, cleaner, brighter, not welcoming exactly, but less worn. This is a space used for preparation rather than confinement. She is seated. Someone smooths her clothing. Someone else checks her hands, her hair, her posture. Not roughly, methodically. They want her to look appropriate. Appropriate is doing a lot of work here. She is allowed to wash properly. Water over her hands, her face, her arms. The sensation is almost overwhelming. Cleanliness has become symbolic, whether she wants it to or not. She does not resist. Resistance would feel out of place now. Her clothing is adjusted, straightened. If something is torn, it is mended simply, not improved, just corrected. She notices that care has been taken to make her appear ordinary, respectable, familiar. This is intentional. Monsters are unsettling. Ordinary people are reassuring. A woman from the community may be present, a matron, someone neutral. She avoids meeting her eyes, not out of shame exactly, out of mutual understanding. Neither of them chose to be here. The priest visits again briefly. He speaks softly, offering words that sound like comfort but function more like punctuation. This is the end of one sentence. Another will follow. He assures her that she has done well, that she has been cooperative, that this matters. She listens. She nods. She has become very good at nodding. As she waits, she notices how quiet everything is. Not silent, but subdued. Doors close gently. Footsteps are measured. There is no rush. There is no need. Everything has been scheduled around her, and the schedule is being followed precisely. She is left alone for a time. This feels deliberate, a final allowance of privacy. She sits and rests her hands in her lap the same way she has so many times before. The gesture feels complete now, like muscle memory settling into its final form. Her thoughts do not race, they drift. She thinks about small things, the texture of bread crust, the smell of rain on dirt, the sound of animals settling at night. These memories arrive without pain. They are simply there, like objects placed gently in front of her. She is aware, dimly, of people gathering elsewhere, not close enough to hear, just close enough to feel. The building seems to hold its breath in a polite, institutional way. When she is told it is time to move again, the words are almost apologetic. Almost. She stands carefully. Her legs are steady. This surprises her, though it probably shouldn't. As she walks, she notices details she has not seen before. Carvings in wood, cracks in stone, light falling across surfaces in unremarkable ways. Everything feels strangely vivid, as if the world has decided to present itself plainly, without commentary. People look at her as she passes, not with hostility, with curiosity, with relief, with the quiet satisfaction of resolution. She recognizes this look. She has seen it directed at others before.
She keeps her gaze level, not defiant, not submissive, just neutral. Neutral has served her well. There is no chaos, no shouting, no sudden movement. The process unfolds exactly as it has been rehearsed, which is to say, calmly, predictably, without emotion. Emotion would complicate things. She understands now why the waiting mattered so much, why everything slowed down instead of speeding up. This outcome requires participation, not enthusiasm, just compliance, and compliance takes time. As she pauses again, waiting for the next instruction, she feels something like relief, not because of what is coming, but because the endless narrowing has finally stopped. The path is no longer shrinking. It has reached its final width. She breathes evenly. She stands where she is told. She does not look around unnecessarily. There is nothing left to learn from the room. This is the version of her that history will remember, if it remembers her at all. Calm, orderly, cooperative, easy to conclude. And so we remain here in this final stretch before anything public occurs, where everything has been prepared and nothing is left to decide, where the machinery of judgment hums softly in the background, satisfied with its own efficiency, and where a medieval woman, accused and processed and made ready, exists quietly within a system that has already finished with her, even before it formally says so.
This part is almost imperceptible when you're living it. There is no clear beginning to it, no announcement. It simply arrives when everything else has been completed and there is nowhere left to go. She is standing now or sitting somewhere that is not her cell, and the difference matters. Cells are for waiting. This place is for being seen. Even if the crowd is still distant, even if no one is speaking yet, the air has changed. It holds attention. No one is rushing. No one needs to. The slow pace has done its work. She is positioned carefully, gently guided into place as if arrangement itself were the goal. Someone adjusts the distance between her and the next person. Someone steps back and evaluates. Everything looks acceptable. She is aware of people around her without focusing on any of them. Faces blur together. Expressions settle into something neutral and practiced. No one looks angry. Anger would suggest instability. What she sees instead is composure, relief, a community watching order reassert itself. She keeps her hands still. She has learned that stillness communicates many useful things: acceptance, calm, cooperation. These qualities are noted even when no one says so aloud. The sounds around her are muted: footsteps, fabric shifting, the soft clearing of throats. No dramatic speeches yet, just the quiet preparation of a moment that has already been decided. She feels tired in a very specific way, not exhausted, complete, like a task that has been worked through carefully, step by step, until nothing remains unfinished. The fear that once surged through her has thinned into something manageable, almost abstract. She thinks briefly about how this moment will be described later, if it is described at all, likely in simple terms. She was calm. She did not resist. She appeared repentant. These phrases are easy to write, easy to believe, easy to move past. No one asks her anything now. There are no questions left. That part of her life is concluded. She is here to occupy a role, not to contribute information. She notices that people stand a little farther away than before. Distance is important at this stage. It allows everyone to feel safe. It allows the moment to remain orderly. Her breathing stays even. This surprises her again, though by now she should be used to being surprised by her own composure. The body adapts. It always does. There is a pause, a long one, long enough for the air to feel heavy but not uncomfortable. This pause exists for the benefit of the observers, not her. It allows the weight of the situation to settle properly. She does not fill the silence. She never does anymore. Somewhere nearby, a familiar voice begins to speak. Calm, measured, formal. Words about procedure, about understanding, about resolution. The content matters less than the tone. The tone signals that everything is proceeding correctly. She listens without reacting. Reaction is unnecessary now. Everything that could be felt has already been felt, earlier in private. over long nights and longer days. Her thoughts drift again to ordinary things: the feel of worn fabric, the smell of clean water, the sound of quiet footsteps. These thoughts do not feel like escape. They feel like completion, like closing a book gently instead of slamming it shut. She understands now, with a clarity that feels almost academic, why these moments are so rarely described in detail. They are not dramatic. They are administrative. They are the final confirmation that a process has worked exactly as intended. She stands where she is. She waits for the next instruction, not with anticipation, but with readiness. Readiness has replaced hope. It is a steadier thing. No one touches her unless necessary. When they do, it is brief and professional. Touch has become functional, stripped of meaning. The world feels oddly balanced, as if everything has found its proper place, however unfair that place may be. And so this moment stretches, calm and unremarkable, a quiet threshold that does not announce itself as such. The space just before conclusion, the pause that exists not for her sake, but for everyone else's. We remain here with her, in this suspended stillness, where nothing violent occurs, nothing sudden intrudes, and nothing changes except the understanding that the long waiting has finally brought her to the point where waiting is no longer required, only presence. And the presence itself is enough.
At some point, the waiting stops being an action and becomes a condition. Not something she is doing, but something that has been completed on her behalf. She is led a short distance, not far enough to feel like travel, just enough to mark a transition. The ground changes under her feet, stone to packed earth, indoors to something more open. The shift is subtle but unmistakable. She feels it in the air first, cooler, wider, less contained. No one explains where she is being placed. Explanation would suggest choice, and choice is no longer relevant. Instead, she is guided gently, remembered rather than directed, as if the space itself already knows where she belongs. She notices how carefully everyone moves. No sudden gestures, no unnecessary sound. Even the people watching seem quieter than before, as though they understand that noise would be inappropriate here. The moment is not dramatic, it is ceremonial, and ceremony favors restraint. She stands, or sits, or is positioned in a way that feels final without being aggressive. Nothing hurts, nothing startles. That too feels intentional. The process has been designed to avoid disruption. Her thoughts slow even further, not because she is losing awareness, but because awareness no longer needs to anticipate. Anticipation has already been exhausted. She notices the way light falls across the ground, the way shadows stretch without urgency, the way fabric moves slightly in the breeze. These details feel sharper now, not because they are important, but because they are uncomplicated. They exist without interpretation. Someone nearby speaks again. The voice is familiar, calm, formal. Words about order, about understanding, about closure. She has heard these phrases before in other contexts, applied to other people. Now they pass over her without resistance. She does not respond unless prompted. When she does, her voice is quiet and steady, not emotional, not detached, simply present. Presence has become her final contribution. There is a strange courtesy in how people regard her now. Not kindness exactly, more like satisfaction that she has fulfilled her role properly, that she has not complicated things, that she has behaved as expected. She feels tired, but it is a gentle tiredness, the kind that follows long effort, not panic. Her body seems to understand that it has reached the end of a long task. If fear appears, it does so briefly, like a thought that arrives late to a conversation that has already moved on. It has nothing new to add. It fades again without argument.
She thinks once more about how history will remember this, if it remembers it at all. Likely as a single sentence, a date, a conclusion. Everything that came before this moment compressed into something neat and manageable. The irony does not upset her. Irony requires energy. She adjusts her stance slightly, more for comfort than necessity. No one objects. Comfort at this point is allowed in small doses. It does not threaten the outcome. The world around her feels balanced, as if everyone has agreed, silently, to behave properly until this is finished. Even the air seems to cooperate. She breathes in, breathes out, slowly, deliberately. She has practiced this. This is the last stretch of time that still belongs to her, even if no one acknowledges it as such. A narrow space where nothing is demanded, nothing is taken, and nothing is questioned. She exists within it calmly, without urgency, without resistance, without surprise. And so we stay here with her in this final, unremarkable quiet, where the long process has reached its conclusion, not with chaos or cruelty, but with order, routine, and a collective sense that everything has gone according to plan. The waiting is over now. All that remains is stillness. Once the final words have been spoken, once the procedures have reached their natural pause, nothing immediately happens to her. That is another detail history tends to skip. There is often a small pocket of time afterward, where everyone involved adjusts to the fact that the decision has been formally made. She is guided aside again, not hurried, not handled roughly, just repositioned into a quieter space nearby, where the air feels less crowded with attention. The public part is finished now, even if the day itself is not. The machinery has done what it came to do. She sits, or stands, or waits in a posture that has become second nature. Her body knows how to do this without instruction. It has learned the language of stillness fluently. Around her, people begin to relax in subtle ways. Shoulders drop, voices lower. The tension that once filled the space drains off quietly, like water finding a new place to settle. Whatever fear or uncertainty the community carried has been neatly contained and labeled. She is no longer the focus. This is important. Focus is heavy. Its absence feels almost like relief. No one speaks to her unless necessary. She is not ignored out of cruelty, but out of completion. There is nothing left to extract from her. No more cooperation required. No more understanding needed. If someone looks at her now, it is briefly, almost politely, the way one looks at something that has already been accounted for. Her thoughts drift again, gently, without urgency. She does not try to hold on to them. They come and go like slow-moving clouds. There is no reason to chase any particular one. She notices her breathing, still steady, still slow. The body continues doing what it has learned to do, regardless of meaning. Time behaves strangely here. Minutes stretch or compress. It is difficult to tell. Without anticipation, time loses one of its main functions. It becomes something to occupy rather than something to endure. She is given water. She drinks it calmly. The gesture feels almost domestic, which is quietly surreal. Even now, ordinary routines persist. The priest may appear once more, though this time he says very little. There is nothing left to persuade, nothing left to prepare. His presence is symbolic rather than practical, a closing bracket rather than a new paragraph. She listens. She nods. She does not search his face for answers. Answers belong to earlier stages of the process. Her body feels heavy again, but comfortably so, like someone settling into a chair they have been standing near for a long time. There is no fight left in her, but there is also no panic, just presence.
Nearby, life continues in small, distant ways. Someone speaks too loudly and is hushed. Someone laughs briefly and stops. The world recalibrates itself gently around the moment. She understands, now more than ever, that this entire process has not been about her as an individual. Individuals are inconvenient. This has been about reassurance, about structure, about making fear manageable by giving it a shape and a timeline. Knowing this does not anger her. Anger requires energy she no longer has reason to spend. She remains where she is, quiet and composed, as the last administrative details are handled somewhere else, by people whose role is to move things from one column to another. This too is part of the daily life before the end, the remembered stillness, the strange calm that follows certainty, the way the world continues to function politely around someone who is already, in any meaningful sense, concluded. And so we rest here with her a little longer, in this subdued aftermath of decision, where nothing dramatic occurs, where nothing needs to be said, and where the long story of waiting, questioning, adjusting, and agreeing has finally reached a point of rest. Not with noise, not with spectacle, just with quiet.
After everything has been decided, after the words have settled and the officials have moved on to their next obligations, what remains for her is something surprisingly mundane. Not fear, not ceremony, just time. Plain, unremarkable time. She's moved once more, not far, into a space that feels temporarily borrowed. A side room, a waiting area that does not quite know what it is for anymore. The stone is the same, the air smells the same, only the purpose has changed. No one watches her closely now. That work is finished. Attention has shifted elsewhere, to schedules and arrangements, and other matters that need tending. She exists on the edge of the day, rather than at its center. She sits and rests her back against the wall. The stone is cool, steady, familiar. Familiarity has become oddly comforting. She places her hands in her lap without thinking about it. They settle there naturally, as if they had been practicing for this moment. Her breathing remains slow, even. She notices it without trying to control it. Control is no longer part of the equation. Someone brings her water again, maybe bread, something small, ordinary. The gesture feels almost tender, though she knows it is procedural rather than personal. Still, she accepts it. Refusing would serve no purpose. She eats slowly. The taste is faint, not unpleasant, just distant. Hunger is softened into something abstract. She eats because that is what one does when food is placed in front of you. Around her, voices drift in and out, conversations about unrelated things, practical things. The world, it turns out, does not revolve around conclusions for very long. There are always other tasks waiting. She listens without really hearing. Words pass through her without sticking. Her thoughts are quieter than they have been in weeks. There is nothing left to prepare for. Preparation has been completed thoroughly. She thinks briefly about the path that brought her here. Not in detail, not with regret, just in awareness of length, how long it took, how many small moments filled the space between accusation and this quiet pause. This, she realizes, has been her daily life for some time now. Not fear or pain, but administration, routine, the steady narrowing of options until only one remained. She adjusts her posture slightly. Her legs have gone stiff. She stretches them, gently, carefully. The body still wants comfort, even now, even here. If someone looks at her, they do so briefly, with neutrality, perhaps even with a trace of respect. She has been compliant, cooperative. She has not complicated the process. That counts for something in a system like this. Time continues to pass, slowly, without ceremony, without warning. The kind of passing that feels almost merciful in its lack of drama. She closes her eyes for a moment. Just a moment. Not to escape, just to rest them. Light has become tiring. Darkness feels softer. When she opens them again, nothing has changed. This is reassuring. She understands now why so many accounts describe people in her position as calm. It is not bravery. It is not acceptance in the philosophical sense. It is the natural outcome of having every sharp edge worn down, one day at a time. The mind cannot stay clenched forever. Eventually, it loosens its grip. She remains here, breathing, existing, inhabiting these last ordinary moments as fully as she can, even if no one would think to call them that. Ordinary, unremarkable, quiet. These moments do not look important from the outside. They are not recorded, they are not quoted, they are not preserved. But they are hers. And so we stay with her here, in this gentle, uncelebrated stretch of time, where the long process has stripped away everything except presence, where the world hums softly around her, unconcerned, orderly, and already turning its attention elsewhere. Nothing dramatic happens. Nothing needs to. The day simply continues. By now, the day has found its rhythm again, the way days always do once a disruption has been neatly resolved. Somewhere nearby, bells ring for reasons that have nothing to do with her. Meals are prepared, doors open and close for ordinary purposes. Life, remarkably adaptable, resumes its usual pace. She remains where she has been placed, not forgotten, but no longer centered. This too is part of the process, being gradually eased out of relevance. The intensity that once surrounded her has dissolved into background procedure. Someone checks on her briefly, not to question, just to confirm. A glance, a nod. Everything is as expected. She has become predictable, and predictability is comforting to systems like this. Her body feels heavy in a different way now, not with fear, not with anticipation, just with the awareness of gravity, of being present in a body that has carried her through a very long sequence of days. She shifts slightly, easing pressure in her joints. Small comforts still matter, even at the end of things. She listens to the sounds around her without trying to identify them. Footsteps blend together, voices rise and fall without meaning. Somewhere, someone laughs briefly, then stops. The sound does not bother her. It feels distant, belonging to a different layer of reality. She thinks again about the word witch, though it no longer feels personal. It feels like a label that has passed through her rather than attached itself to her. A role she has inhabited temporarily, much like a costume worn for a single performance. If she feels anything like sadness, it is mild and unfocused. Not grief for what is ending, but a soft recognition of what will not continue. Ordinary things, repetition, routine, the quiet satisfaction of completing small tasks. She remembers suddenly how often her life used to be measured in chores. Water fetched, bread kneaded, floors swept. Time once moved in circles rather than lines. That feels important, though she cannot quite say why. Someone tells her it will not be long now. The phrase is delivered neutrally, almost kindly. She nods, because nodding has become a fluent language. She does not ask how long. Precision is unnecessary. She takes a slow breath and lets it out again. The motion feels grounding, familiar. She has been breathing this way for days, weeks, perhaps longer. It is one of the few constants left. The light shifts again. She notices it without comment. Light has been a quiet companion throughout all of this, marking time without judgment. It continues to do so now. She understands, in a distant, observational way, that this is the final version of waiting, not the tense waiting of uncertainty, not the practiced waiting of compliance,
but the simple waiting of sequence. One thing ends, and another follows. The order has already been agreed upon. Her thoughts no longer reach outward. They stay close, simple, present. The mind, having been pushed so hard for so long, has learned to rest when given the chance. If anyone were to describe her now, they might say she appears calm. They might say she is composed. They might say she has accepted her fate. These are tidy words, useful words. She does not concern herself with them. She exists. That, it turns out, is enough. And so we remain with her here, in this quiet interval where the world has already adjusted, where the story has already been told and retold in simpler terms, and where a medieval woman, once ordinary and then briefly infamous, occupies the last stretch of her daily life. No speeches, no revelations, just the steady continuation of time, doing what it always does, moving forward without comment, carrying everything with it, whether it is remembered or not.
At this point, even the idea of next feels abstract. Events are no longer something she anticipates. They simply arrive, gently, when they are ready, like footsteps that stop just outside the door without needing to knock. She is moved again, briefly, calmly, as if everyone involved has agreed that suddenness would be impolite. The space she is brought into feels neither new nor familiar. It exists somewhere in between, a place meant for short stays rather than long thoughts. She is told to sit. She sits. The air here feels cooler, cleaner. Perhaps it is closer to the outside. Perhaps it is simply less crowded with emery. She notices the difference without assigning meaning to it. Meaning has been handled already by other people. Someone adjusts her position slightly, not to restrain her, just to place her correctly. Correct placement has been important throughout this entire process. She has learned to appreciate it as a form of order. There is another pause. Not dramatic, not heavy, just functional. Time is being allowed to line itself up properly. She notices that her body feels oddly light now, as if the long strain has finally loosened its grip. Muscles still ache, joints still protest, but the deeper tension has faded. She feels present without effort. Her thoughts wander briefly to the idea of legacy, then drift away again. Legacy is for people with names that survive paperwork. She understands this now. Understanding it does not hurt. It feels neutral. If fear appears again, it does so faintly, more out of habit than necessity. The body remembers what fear remembers, even when the mind has moved on. She acknowledges it, then lets it pass without resistance. She listens to the sounds around her. Quiet voices, careful movement, the soft, respectful choreography of people who know exactly what they are supposed to do next. Everyone is behaving properly. That seems important. She is given a moment alone, or perhaps she is simply not being watched closely. The difference no longer matters. Privacy and isolation have blended together over the long weeks. She rests her head lightly against the wall and closes her eyes for a few breaths, just enough to feel the cool stone, just enough to feel grounded in something solid and unchanging. She thinks again about how ordinary all of this feels, not in a dismissive way, in a factual one. The strangeness has worn off. What remains is procedure, carried out by people who have done this before and will do it again. When she opens her eyes, nothing has shifted. The light is the same. The air is the same. The world has not altered itself in response to her thoughts, and she does not expect it to. Someone returns and speaks quietly. The words are simple, reassuring in their way. Everything is in order. Everything is ready. There is nothing else she needs to do. She nods once, smoothly, precisely. It feels like the final nod in a very long series. Her breathing remains slow, even. The body, having learned this rhythm through repetition, maintains it without instruction. This feels like an accomplishment, though no one will ever note it. She sits in this stillness without impatience. Impatience belongs to uncertainty. Certainty has no need for it. This is the final shape of her daily life before the end. Not fear, not struggle, just presence, just time moving forward at its own quiet pace. And so we stay with her here, in this last unhurried interval where nothing is demanded and nothing is resisted, where the long process has reached its calmest point, and a medieval woman, once accused and then carefully guided through every step that followed, exists quietly, completely, and without urgency as the world continues doing what it has always done, moving on. By now, the day has thinned into something pale and indistinct, like light seen through fabric. Nothing presses forward, nothing pulls back. Time has become a soft surface rather than a line. She is no longer being guided from place to place. Movement has finished its work. What remains is position, stillness, a sense that everything has been arranged exactly as it needs to be, and that no further adjustment would improve it. People nearby speak only when necessary. Their voices are low, professional, almost tender in their restraint. They have learned through repetition that calm makes everything easier. Calm prevents complication. Calm keeps the world intact. She notices that her body feels unusually balanced. Feet grounded, shoulders relaxed, hands resting naturally. It is not comfort exactly, but it is not discomfort either. It is neutrality, refined. She does not think about what comes next in specific terms. Specifics belong to other people now. Her role has narrowed to presence alone, and presence requires very little effort. If she feels sadness, it is distant, like a sound heard through walls. If she feels relief, it is equally faint. The emotional landscape has flattened into something smooth and manageable. This is what happens when the mind has been given no reason to brace itself anymore. She becomes aware, in a detached way, that this is the moment history usually skips, the space between description and conclusion, the stretch where nothing symbolic happens, nothing quotable occurs, and nothing dramatic presents itself for later retelling. This is where real life tends to reside. She breathes, in, out, slowly. The motion feels automatic now, no longer something she monitors. Her body has learned what is required of it and performs the task quietly. Someone stands at a respectful distance, not watching closely, just present. Presence, it turns out, is often enough. The world around her continues to function without interruption. Somewhere, someone is late for something entirely unrelated. Somewhere else, someone is preparing a meal. The machinery of ordinary life hums on, indifferent and reliable. She does not resent this. Resentment would imply expectation. Expectation has long since dissolved. She thinks briefly about how many women passed through this same sequence of days. How many sat in similar rooms, learned the same lessons about quiet and cooperation, and were remembered, if at all, only as conclusions rather than lives. The thought does not weigh on her. It feels observational, almost academic. Her eyes rest on nothing in particular. Light, shadow, stone. The details are simple and sufficient. She does not need more than this. If there is any last adjustment to be made, it happens without comment. A small movement, a brief instruction. Everything is handled efficiently, without spectacle. She complies because compliance has long since ceased to feel like a choice, and begun to feel like gravity, natural, predictable, unremarkable. This is not courage, it is not surrender, it is simply what remains after every other response has been carefully worn away. And so the story loosens its grip here, not with a sharp ending, not with a raised voice, but with a gradual quieting, like a room after everyone has left and the furniture has settled back into place. This is where the daily life of a medieval woman accused of witchcraft gently leaves the historical record, not because her life lacked meaning, but because systems rarely know what to do with quiet endings. So we let the silence hold, and we move on, softly, without urgency, the way the world always does. What remains now is not an action, but an atmosphere. The kind of calm that settles only after a story has finished being told too many times. The kind that exists when nothing new can be added without disturbing the shape of things. She is still there, of course, still breathing, still occupying space, but the story no longer needs her attention. It has already moved ahead, smoothing itself into something simple and repeatable. Around her, people behave as though the most important work is already done. There are no sharp glances, no careful measurements, no rehearsed words left to practice. The tone has shifted fully into maintenance. Someone stands nearby, not guarding so much as accompanying. Their presence is practical, almost courteous. They do not watch her closely. There is nothing left to watch for. She notices how natural this feels now, how easily she exists within the stillness. Earlier, stillness had to be learned, practiced, endured. Now it arrives on its own, settling into her posture without effort. Her thoughts drift again, but not toward the past or the future. They hover in the present, light and unfocused. The mind, when finally released from uncertainty, does not always rush to fill the space. Sometimes it simply rests. She listens to the building breathe, old stone expanding and contracting, wood settling, the quiet industry of a place that has outlived countless moments like this one. The structure does not judge, it only holds. If someone speaks to her now, it is brief, functional, a reminder to wait, a confirmation that everything is proceeding. She nods, because nodding is fluent and costs nothing. Time continues its slow, patient movement, not dragging, not rushing, simply moving the way it always has, indifferent to significance. She thinks, distantly, about how this part of her life would be impossible to explain to someone who had not lived it, how the long waiting, the careful shaping, the gradual softening cannot be captured in a single sentence. Most accounts will not try. They will say she was accused. They will say she confessed. They will say she was dealt with. None of that includes this quiet. Her body remains steady. There is no trembling now, no urge to fidget. Even discomfort has softened into something manageable. The body, like the mind, has learned that resistance is no longer required. The light shifts again. It always does. She notes it without interest. Light has been one of the few consistent companions throughout this process, arriving and leaving without comment. Someone passes by without looking at her, not deliberately, just naturally. This feels like a small milestone, though no one marks it. Being unseen again, even briefly, feels oddly familiar. She understands now that this is how lives exit the historical stage, not with a clear line or a dramatic pause, but by becoming less necessary to observe. The process that once demanded so much of her attention has released her from it entirely. She exists. That is enough.
And so we linger here just a little longer in this gentle aftermath of narrative, where the tension has dissolved, where the outcome has already been absorbed by the world around her, and a medieval woman, once pulled into focus by fear and suspicion, fades back into the quiet continuity of time. No sound cues, no closing statements, just the soft understanding that the story has said what it needed to say, and that silence, once again, knows exactly what to do.
There comes a moment when even stillness feels complete. Not finished, exactly, just settled, like dust after it has finally stopped drifting and chosen a surface to rest on. She is no longer being told to wait, because waiting implies expectation. Now she is simply present in a space that has no further instructions attached to it. This is a subtle distinction, but an important one. Instruction has been the rhythm of her days for so long that its absence feels noticeable, even gentle. People move around her with ease, not avoidance, not attention, just movement. They know where they are going. They know what comes next. None of it requires her involvement. She adjusts her weight slightly, more out of habit than discomfort. The body still responds to small cues, even when the larger narrative has let go. She smooths the fabric of her clothing without thinking. Familiar gestures are comforting because they ask nothing in return. Her breathing remains slow, not deliberate, not controlled, simply happening. This feels like a small miracle, though she would never frame it that way. If she thinks at all, it is in fragments, sensations rather than sentences, cool air, firm ground, the distant echo of sound in stone. Thoughts no longer line up in a way that suggests direction. They arrive, linger briefly, and dissolve. This is not emptiness, it is spaciousness. She notices that no one is watching her hands anymore. Once, hands were suspicious, too still, too expressive, too capable. Now they rest quietly, unremarkable, and that seems to be enough. Somewhere nearby, a door opens and closes. The sound is soft, routine, almost polite. She does not react. Doors have opened and closed around her for a long time now. This one does not change anything. Time continues its slow, unbothered movement, not dragging, not rushing, just passing. She feels it more in her body than her mind, a subtle heaviness, a gentle fatigue, nothing sharp. If there is fear left, it has learned to behave itself. It sits quietly, like an object that has been examined too many times to hold mystery anymore. She does not push it away. She does not engage with it. She lets it be. She becomes aware, dimly, that this is what it means for a system to be finished with someone. Not rejection, not punishment, just disinterest. The work is done. The outcome has been filed. Attention has moved on. There is something almost peaceful about that, if one allows oneself to notice it. She remembers vaguely a time when her days were structured by light and tasks, rather than by people and questions. Morning meant one thing, evening meant another. Life once moved according to needs rather than decisions. That memory does not sting. It floats past, acknowledged and released. She does not try to hold on to her name. Names are useful when they are spoken often. Hers has already begun to fade into the background noise of record and rumor. This feels neither tragic nor comforting. It simply is. If someone were to describe her now, they would struggle. There is nothing to point to. No reaction, no resistance, no performance. Just a woman occupying space without asking it to mean anything. And perhaps that is why this moment is never recorded. It does not teach a lesson. It does not warn or inspire. It does not resolve neatly into moral clarity. It simply exists and then passes. She remains still, not frozen, not tense, just present. And we stay with her here in this final stretch where nothing is demanded and nothing is offered, where the long sequence of days has dissolved into quiet continuity, and where the story, having followed her as far as it knows how, finally steps back. Not because she disappears, but because the world has already decided it no longer needs to look.